and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a tutorial, which I know I haven't done in a little while actually on my channel, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to do one today, and it's going to be kind of like a too long didn't read for my entire channel. So if there's a lot of you guys who are newly subscribed to my channel and you haven't watched a lot of my previous videos, a lot of my Photoshop tutorials where I go over points about beauty retouching and fashion retouching, I'm going to sum some of my favorites up into this video right now, and these are my favorite Photoshop tips and tricks that I want to share with you guys in one video. I feel like there's so many different ways you can edit and retouch with tools in Photoshop, and I think these are a few that are maybe lesser known. Some of them are lesser known, some of them are obviously more popular, but I do want to go over a couple of them just in case you guys have maybe missed them in some of my videos, or if you're looking for a little bit of guidance on how to edit your portraits in Photoshop in general. So my first tip today is going to be about black and white adjustment layers, and this particular tip is great for bringing back texture, regaining texture in your images, and highlighting freckles as well. So this is a really good tip, especially for beauty portraits. If you want a little bit more texture in the skin, this is how I like to do it. So usually I would start by going to the adjustment layers panel down the bottom here and going up to black and white. And by clicking on that, we have made our image desaturated and into a black and white image, but we don't want that. So we're actually going to set the blending mode, which is just over here in this box, to luminosity, which is right down the bottom. And there we go, we've got our color photo again. And now we're going to move some of the sliders in this panel here. So I usually move the reds and the yellows, and a lot of you may know this tip already because I have talked about this tip quite a bit in my previous beauty retouching tutorials. It's one of my favorites. So what I really like to do is move the reds and the yellows because those two colors are the most prominent in skin tones. So for portraits, these are usually the tools that you're going to be using the most. So usually I'll move the reds first and kind of get a little bit more contrast going in the skin tone. That's obviously making the background a little bit darker as well because it is pink, but that's okay because I don't mind the effect that it's giving. We're actually going to move the yellows now as well and bring that down to see how much texture we can bring back there. And then just move the reds up and down a little bit more. You can do a little bit less on either of them and just move them around until it suits the image that you have. So I'm going to show you guys a quick before and after of that adjustment layer now, and it's really quite amazing how much texture that can bring back. So the before and after, this is the before and this is the after. So it really does deepen the skin tone, it deepens the colors, and it gives you that really nice texture for portraits in particular. I'm going to zoom in as well and show you guys what it does to the freckles because I feel like this is my favorite part of using this adjustment layer. So turning it on and off, this is the before, and that's the after. So that's my first favorite tip in Photoshop for retouching portraits. So I'm going to be refreshing the image every time I talk about a new tip, just so we can focus on one thing at a time and you guys can see the difference between the original. So on to the next tip, and my second favorite tip is dodging and burning for pretty much everything. So I've talked about dodging and burning a lot in previous tutorials, and I'm actually going to do quite a few links in the description box below and link you to all the other tutorials that I've done for each of these tips, or for the ones that I have done tutorials on. So dodge and burn, like I said, is something that I've talked about a lot before in previous videos. It is my favorite way to do skin retouching in particular because it allows me to highlight the better parts of the skin and darken the areas to give more shape and contouring to the skin tone as well. So I really love using dodge and burn, and I would say that I use it not just for skin retouching but for lots of different things in the image. So whether that be for whitening teeth a little bit more, whether it be for lightening the background, getting rid of creases in particular, like this one here I'll show you guys in just a second, and also enhancing makeup and eyes. I use the dodge and burn tools for that as well, but honestly I would use it on hair as well. There's pretty much endless amounts of things that you can use it for, and that's why I like using that as a tool overall. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration now and show you guys what I'd probably use dodge and burn in this image for. And I feel like there's pretty good highlights overall in this image, so I don't feel like we need to enhance them too much. But what we need to do is just go over some of the areas in the skin tone where it's a little bit patchy on the sides here, and maybe get rid of those creases in the background. So I'm going to duplicate the background layer here. And usually I'll do some basic healing tools on this layer, mainly for the skin tone, maybe the spot healing brush just to get rid of a few blemishes. And I'm also going to create a couple of adjustment layers. So in the adjustment layers panel here, we're going to go up to curves. And this one's going to be the dodge layer. I think I've done this tutorial a million times on my channel, but for those of you who haven't seen it before, this is going to be a really quick rundown. So usually I move the bar just up to here so the image is nice and bright. As I said, this is the dodge layer. We're going to hold Control and I on the keyboard, and that will invert the selection. So that allows us to mask in what we're going to put down as the dodging. I'm going to create a really similar layer now using the curves adjustment layers again, but this time I'm going to bring the bar down so the image is quite dark. But I'm going to do the same thing again by holding down Control and I on the keyboard. And there we go. So we've got two inverted layers there. I'm going to rename these now so it's not confusing. So that one is dodge, the first one that we created, and this one is going to be named burn as well. So once those are labeled, I will start with the background copy layer first. And then I would usually remove the blemishes in this photograph. Now I do have many tutorials on doing this, so I'm not going to go through the whole rundown, but I'm going to go straight onto the dodge and burn now. So I just want to let you guys know what that layer is exactly for. It's for the healing tools. But here I will go to the dodge layer usually and get my brush. And I'll make it quite a small brush at 1% flow. And making sure the color selected is white as well. And I usually like my brush settings to be on transfer and pen pressure for flow jitter. So now I would usually just start doing my dodging and burning on the skin tone. And that usually involves running over the brush tool on the areas that are a little bit too dark that I want to be lightened up a bit more. So I would probably enhance the makeup in this shot a little bit more and brighten up some of the under eye like I'm doing now. And just some of the blemishes as well on the skin tone. Sometimes dodge and burn can take care of most of the blemishes instead of using the healing tools. So I usually do like to try and get most of them smoothed out with the dodge and burn tools first before I use the healing tools, because the healing tools can be a little bit more destructive. So I'm just going over the little patches in the skin tone. And over the makeup again, just in the areas where we can lighten it up a bit more. And this is just quite a rough dodge and burn tutorial, as most of you guys will probably know. I've got much more comprehensive dodge and burn tutorials on my channel where I really go into in-depth skin retouching. But right now I'm just going over those blemishes and we're just smoothing out the skin tone a little bit more. And then I would go over the eyes just to brighten them up a little bit. I usually go quite light-handed with this. I don't go too heavy-handed because it can start to look a bit doll-like and a bit fake. I would usually go over the teeth as well just a little bit to brighten them up. And I also use my burn tool here. So we haven't used the burn layer yet, but I do use that on the skin as well. It's important not to just use the dodge tool because it can kind of make your skin tone lose a bit of depth. So I like to go over the areas just kind of in the more shadowed parts with the burn tool just to fill in those gaps and make it a little bit softer too. And then last of all in this image, I'd go back to the dodge layer and I'd start removing the shadows out of the backdrop. So just kind of going over some of those obvious creased areas in the backdrop. This was a material backdrop, so I'm sure a lot of you guys probably have a very similar issue with trying to remove them. And one of the ways I do like to remove them is just by using dodge and burn. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out and I want to show you guys a quick before and after of just what those slight adjustments have done with dodge and burn. So that is the before and that is the after with dodge and burn. So it is quite a powerful way of editing skin and editing portraits, and it's definitely a way that I would recommend to anyone who's just starting out or wanting to learn a little bit more about retouching. My next favorite tip for Photoshop and editing portraits is actually the spot healing brush tool. And what I like to use this tool for is removing stray hairs. Now we're back to the original image here, and as you can see, there are quite a few stray hairs here. Stray hairs are like the bane of my existence. They are the most frustrating thing for me to remove. However, I usually do find that the spot healing brush tool does most of the work for me. I do find that you have to be quite careful with the ones that you are removing and not to go too far with it. But I think overall, I really do love the way that the tool works, and it does make my life a little bit easier when it comes to removing stray hairs. So a quick demonstration, I'm going to zoom in and we're going to duplicate the background copy layer, and I'm going to select the spot healing brush tool just over here and get my brush size just about a little bit bigger than the size of the hairs that I'm wanting to remove. And then I'm going to start to remove them just by running the brush over them. And I really do feel like this is the best way to go if you've got a few stray hairs to remove, or even if you've got a lot and you want to spend the time trying to get them out. This is really a good way to go. I also like to make sure that my brush settings are at pen pressure with size. That makes it a little bit more accurate for you to select the hairs that you want to remove. So I'm going to continue removing a few more stray hairs over on this side of the image. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out and show you guys a quick before and after. I'm also on this side of the face where there are a few more stray hairs. So the before, and I'll zoom in even further, and the after. So it's just kind of a small adjustment there, but you can see how much cleaner the image does start to look once you get rid of those stray hairs. And like I said, it's one of the easiest and most effective ways to remove them, in my opinion. My next favorite tip would have to be using luminosity masks for color grading and for lighting. This is one of my favorite tips, and mainly for color grading, but also for lighting. I feel like it's a really important tool, and I'm going to show you guys a really quick demonstration on how to use it for both. But I do actually have a couple of tutorials on luminosity masks, so I'm going to link them down in the description box below as well if you want to learn about them a little bit more. However, just a brief tutorial on them right now. Luminosity masks actually select part of an image and they break it up, I guess, into luminosity, I guess you would say. So you can break your image up into darker elements or into the lighter highlights of the image and start to adjust the lighting by those sections. So we're going to go into channels. And usually the way that I would make a highlight luminosity mask, so if I was wanting to adjust the highlights, I would hold down Control and click RGB. And as you can see, that has selected all of the brightest parts of the image. Now there's different ways. Like I said, I do have a tutorial on this that you can have a little bit of a look at if you've got a few spare minutes. And that will teach you guys how to do a darker luminosity mask for the shadows or midtones. But I'm just going to show you guys how to do it on the highlights and the brightest parts of the image for now. So it's selected all the brightest parts. Usually now I would go back to layers, and then I would go to adjustment layers, and I would go to levels if I was wanting to adjust the lighting of the image. So if I wanted the highlights to be a little bit more punchier, I would move this tab just over a little bit, just so it's a little bit more brighter and a punchier. So I think that's pretty good. So the before and after, you can see it's just altered the highlighted parts of the image anyway, so it hasn't really touched the shadows too much in the image or the midtones, mainly the brighter parts. So that's the way that I like to adjust my lighting. You can also do the same thing for color grading. So in creating another luminosity mask by holding down Control and clicking on RGB, so the same luminosity mask that we created before, you can go back to the adjustment layers here and click on, for example, color balance, and it will just start to change the colors of the highlighted parts of the image. I think it's a lot more specific, this way of color grading and using light in the image. post-processing, and I really like this way of doing it. I think you have a lot more control over how your image looks in the end. So just going back to the original now, and then a before and after of the luminosity masks. So this is the after. So it just gives it a really nice punchier kind of look, and like I said, gives you a lot more control over the image overall. And my last favorite tip for you guys today is to use the photo filter option. Now, this isn't really one that I've talked about too much in my previous tutorials. However, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it from time to time. And this is the way that I like to basically start off with my color grading and actually find out what sort of tone that I want to go for with my images. Because I feel like this is one of the trickiest things to do as a retoucher or as a photographer when you're editing your photos. Sometimes you don't really know what or where to start with color grading. So by going to the photo filter options, you can go into the adjustment panel here and go up to photo filter. And you'll see that there's a drop down menu here full of warming filters, cooling filters, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, lots of different colors here that will actually give you a slight filter over your image, and you can start to see whether your image might be suited to more of a warm toned photograph or a cool toned photograph. So for example, I'm just going to move down some of the warming filters and the cooling filters, and you can see that it really does make a difference when you're looking at all these different filters in trying to decide on where to go for your color grading. So I actually think in particular for this image, I like more of a warm toned look. I'd probably do this and choose something like the one that I've currently got, and then start to build up my tones and my adjustment layers for my color grading from there. It's just a really good starting point to find out where you want to go with your color grading. Like I said, it's not always the easiest thing to do. When you're looking at your photos, sometimes you just don't know what tones are going to suit best, and I think this is probably one of the easiest ways to figure it out in Photoshop. There used to be a way called variations, I think, that actually got removed from Photoshop quite a few years ago, and I was quite disappointed when that actually did happen. I was talking to my brother about this. He was using Photoshop quite a bit at the time as well, and still does, and it's unfortunately a really, really good tool where you could do something similar to this, but it was a little bit more comprehensive. So I guess photo filter really at the moment is the next best thing, and it's definitely one of my favorite tips. So those are my 5 top tips and tricks for editing portraits in Photoshop, and I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. I know some of those are probably repetitive to other retouching videos that I've already done, but I felt like I've had quite a few new subscribers lately, so I thought I'd do something that was a little bit more summed up and just my top tips overall for retouching portraits. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell to make sure you see all the videos that I've got coming up in coming weeks. And let me know what you want to see on my channel. I'm always up for requests. I am definitely thinking about doing more product reviews, so if you guys have anything in particular that you'd like to see, please put it in the comment section below because I'd love to hear. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial, and I will see you next time. Bye!